Hey everybody, it's Joe DeGanzik, and this is our Q&A episode on LED lighting, or just, lighting in general. We'll have the second one that'll come out probably the same day. And today's March 17th. Happy St. Patrick's Day if you're watching this on March 17th, 2016. So these Q&A episodes, I'll just warn you in advance that these are a little bit longer than our normal, highly produced, kind of more polished episodes. It's a little more free form, and we do put the times in the actual notes, so if you want to skip ahead, there you go. We do about 3 questions in each episode, and we'll also give our shout outs to our Patreon contributors a little bit later in the episode. So let's get right to it. Lighting, one of my favorite subjects. Of course, the show is called Lighting Answers, so I guess you would figure that out by now. A comment from Robert Bailey. Good review. This was, I believe, on one of our buying guide episodes, or the Cree 4-flow episode. Good review. I've taken an interest to LED light bulbs, particularly Cree. My only concern is about the venting around the bulb. Will it build up with lent, not lent. I guess it is lent right now, if you're religious. Whether dirt and dust will shorten the life, cause a fire hazard. As for the Generation 1 Cree, I have got one in my living room, and you're right, the base does get really, really hot. Could it pose a fire hazard because it's so close, to the lamp and the socket that you screw it into? I'm going to stick with traditional incandescents and wait a couple more years. I've got plenty of spares on hand. Well, sorry to hear that you're going to stick with traditional incandescents, but let's just kind of get right to it. So we start with, all right, the incandescents that he's talking about, these guys. These get really hot. I think we've measured these guys at roughly about 200 degrees Fahrenheit or more. Halogens get a little bit hotter because they burn hotter, more hot, and they burn a lot more white. This is literally a traditional incandescent with its little kind of filament that's kind of bouncing there. So that's what he's going to use. You can really switch to LED at this point. He was talking about initially the Cree 4-flow. This is the one that's got the vents on the bottom and the top, and literally it's basically like a convection system. The air comes in at the bottom and goes up at the top. You can literally feel the heat coming out of the bulb, and a little bit of airflow when they're running. And the issue really is, I've had these inside my home for a long time now. Like, I've been running these ever since they came out, which was 2014, and they're really fantastic. I don't have, this is Arizona, this is Phoenix. I don't see a dust or dirt buildup at this point. Definitely not a fire hazard. So there's no heat sink on this one. This is how Cree eliminated the heat sink. This was their original bulb, the one that we destroyed last summer in our drop test, which it wasn't going to survive anyways. And you see the LEDs on the little light tower. But this, the actual ring around it with the little fins like that, you can see that a little bit easier, hopefully. This is the part that gets hot. This is what he was referring to. And after only 10 minutes, this actual heat sink got to about 110 degrees after just 10 minutes. So this is where all the heat's going from the LEDs, which actually get hot, down into the heat sink, and then the heat sink gives off the heat and keeps the LEDs from overheating, prolonging their life. So on the next generation, on the 4-flow, they simply said, we're getting rid of the heat sink, so let's just put that aside, and we're going to make this venting system. The bulb does look better. It looks like a more traditional shaped bulb. So then, of course, we've got the latest generation, not by Cree, but the other funny name, the one that no one can seem to pronounce, Uluxus. This is the one that we've reviewed recently. This is the one, in fact, I tried to destroy and could not, so it still actually looks fairly decent, but it's a little bit pockmarked, and kind of because we threw it down onto the concrete patio a number of times, or a lot actually. But this one also gets rid of the heat. These both are the 2 coolest running bulbs, LED bulbs, on the market at this point, with the Uluxus beating the Cree, because number one, it's got the very traditional bulb shape without any weird vents, and the only part of this bulb that gets hot is the base. This is where the heatsink is. They're directing the heat down instead of the Cree, where they're directing the heat up. There is no heatsink on this bulb. The outer shell does get to about 111 degrees, roughly the same as this heatsink, but the outer shell on this bulb, which is how you would normally grab it to screw it in or unscrew it, only gets to 95 degrees. So that's kind of the question and answer on the heat issue and if they're really vulnerable. Remember, this guy would get to like 200 degrees, including the actual screw. The screw is metal. This is glass. It's all tied together. It's going to get ridiculously hot. So your fixtures that have the little labels on them that talk about, only put a 50 watt bulb or a 60 or a 75 watt, they're basing it on the power that's going in, the power draw, but also the amount of heat that's being generated by this type of bulb. Now, most of those labels really are talking about the older types of bulbs. So that's why you can, if you need to, you can over-spec fixtures with LED or even CFL bulbs, but LED specifically because of their cooler temperatures. They're not going to cause a fire. So trust me, if a fixture can withstand the heat from a 200 degree Fahrenheit incandescent or halogen bulb, they can definitely withstand the heat from an LED bulb. And we haven't tested any LED bulbs that are some ludicrous amount of heat. And you can, I think, let's put up that little slide where we've got all the heat measurements from last year's buying guide. So I think you're okay. And I would encourage you to, Robert, I would encourage you to check out LEDs again. Definitely check out the Uluxus bulb. It looks exactly like a regular old light bulb. Performs really well in our tests, and we really like it thus far. You can get that through our Amazon store. There'll be links in the description. So let's move on. I think we've answered your question. If you have more questions, let me know. Comment from Hewer, no last name, just Hewer. The Sylvania Ultra LED A15 in small print says only works with approved dimmers. WTF. Fancy way of saying we can't produce a bulb that works with all dimmers like other manufacturers. Well, nah, not really. Almost all LED bulbs, including Cree and the Uluxus, and almost all of them are going to say something like that. They're going to say works with approved dimmers. And the reason is because LED bulbs are electronic devices. I mean, CFL bulbs also had to have ballasts to make them special ballasts to make them dimmable. Fluorescent technology is not exactly a complete solid state system, but it still required special circuitry to make those dimmable. Now, we don't talk about CFLs generally to have you buy them on the show. But anyways, LEDs are electronic devices, and they're not going to work perfectly with every dimmer out there. Here's the reason. So I've got several types of light bulbs and several dimmers sitting on the couch next to me. I mean, all right, so we got 4 of these guys, 2 Crees, a Uluxus, and the old incandescent, right? The incandescent is analog. Let's just say it's analog, it's organic, it's not electronic. It's literally a circuit. There's no special circuitry in the bulb at all. All right, so you got these guys. So these 4 need to be compatible with, let's just say, these 4 dimmers. These are all dimmers, right? This is Lutron. This is from their Casita system, but it does work with CFL, LED, and of course, traditional incandescent and halogen, okay? It's a plug-in dimmer. This is the Zuli smart plug. We reviewed this in December. It's actually pretty nifty. It does on-off appliance switching, full dimming, measures your power, probably makes your breakfast too. No, not really, but just watch the review, and it's a pretty cool device. This is Insteon. This is the latest generation of the Insteon lamp link dimmer. This is one, I use many of these throughout my home because I really like the way they work. They also work well with LED bulbs. And of course, with incandescent and halogen, that's what I used to use them with. Here's your just regular old slider dimmer, just up, down. It just sits in line. You plug it into your outlets or extension cords or whatnot, and you plug whatever you're gonna dim into the other end. Instant dimmer, okay? So all of these dimmers are supposed to work with all of these different bulbs, but the manufacturers only have a limited amount of kind of like lab space and money and time to actually do some testing. And they try to test with various types of dimmers. Most dimmers are what are called leading edge. They're basically, these are triacs. I could go into the whole technical explanation, but it's a triac based dimmer, which is basically it's something that cuts the power down. Now, on a traditional bulb, the regular type of dimming works. Traditional triac, where it basically cuts into the sine wave and it just reduces the power. But this type of dimming does not work with a traditional LED. So the manufacturers of LED bulbs have tried to make them more compatible with general dimmers, so you don't have to buy specialized dimmers. And thus, you've got dimmers that will work with multiple different sources. Now, most of these dimmers now say specifically they will work with different types of things: halogen, incandescent, LED, CFL. And specifically, you'll see it on the back of labels on like the Lutron devices. Lutron and Leviton famously make very specific compatible dimmers, and Insteon just makes one type, but generally it's compatible with nearly anything you can dim these days. And let's just say that this guy works some of the time. But this is the reason the manufacturers on the dimmer side and on the bulb side can't test with every possible combination. That's why there's shows like this one. Now, we're going to have an episode coming up that talks all about dimming, and we'll do some comparisons, what to look out for, and it's almost less of a need for that episode now because the compatibility is a lot better these days, but as of like 2 years ago, it still was terrible. But in some ways, you can still run into problems, and I'm here to help you navigate the waters. So that's why you see these warnings. Even on the Uluxus bulb, the one that we tested and we tried to destroy, the package says only works with approved dimmers, and that's the CYA for the manufacturer to say, well, if you plug it into something that doesn't quite dim it quite well, then they're off the hook. So that's the short explanation, as short as I can make it without going into a lot of things, a lot of specifics. When you get into very specific dimming cases, when you're trying to dim LEDs that are perhaps on light strips, that are not 120 voltage, then you've got issues. You got to get specific dimmers. But if you're dealing with regular screw-in LED bulbs that are dimmable, they say they're dimmable from the manufacturer, most of these dimmers that you can find on the market, home automation or otherwise, are generally going to work most of the time, and that's my statement. That's covered. That's a CYA for me. So that's your answer. I hope that answered your question. So real quick, some shout outs. Shout outs to Andrew and Richard. Thank you for being Patreon contributors. Patreon, you say? What the heck is that? Patreon is a way for you, the audience, the viewer, who perhaps thinks that they get a lot of use out of our content. They want to support the show more than just clicking that thumbs up button or sharing it on social media. They contribute $1, a couple bucks. All the people mentioned on this show contributed at least a couple bucks. I believe it's 3 or 5. It's a pretty minimal amount that we'll actually give them a shout out and say thank you on a couple episodes a month. Generally, it's going to be these Q&A episodes because they're more free-flowing, a little less edited, and so forth, and we can spend a little more time on these things. But Patreon is a way that you can support Lighting Answers on a monthly basis. And if you don't want to do it on a monthly basis, well, you can actually just head over to our main channel page on YouTube, and on the right side of the page, there's a button that says Support Lighting Answers, and you could make just a one-time contribution. Some people have done that thus far. Thank you to those people. We haven't promised shout-outs to those people. We have shout-outs and things, and being recognized on our About page on the website is one of the perks, one of the many perks on the Patreon side. And Patreon is secure. It's used by many content creators and YouTubers, basically because YouTube, we make a little bit of money on the ads, we make some money on the Amazon store, we make a little money here and there, but it all adds up. So if you'd like to be a Patreon contributor, even at the dollar amount, heck, if I had $1 for all the subscribers we had, we would be doing pretty well. So there is that, and one of the perks also with these Q&As, I can only answer so much on the show, and kind of in this one-way format. You send an email, I email you back, or I reply to you on the show. If you want something more interactive, if you want to get an hour of my time via Skype, FaceTime, Google Hangouts, or whatnot. You can actually contribute with Patreon up to a certain dollar amount and buy an hour of my time every month if you'd like, for home automation and lighting consulting in real time. And then it actually helps a lot to see what you're describing, and I can show you, or I can demo things for you. So that's another option. And we've got at least one person taking advantage of that right now. So thanks to them. So let's move on and get back on with the show. Email from Steve, and this is going to be a little bit of a long response. I've been watching several of your YouTube videos and been very impressed. Thank you so much. My initial link to you was in a search for home automation, which that's great. We're one of the better, one of the more well-known channels for home automation and lighting. Question to you is advice on setting up kitchen lighting on a blank slate. This is remodeling a 14 by 20 kitchen, includes a dinette, a fairly basic layout. Plan is to tear out the ugly fluorescent box. I think we all know what that looks like, kind of a big fluorescent box thing that they used to have, kind of recessed lighting, and then you had those plastic panels. Or he might actually have just a generic couple of fluorescent tubes and one of those translucent box things. Ugly, ugly. I see new homes still being built with these things, and it just makes me cringe. Like, what are you doing? The kitchen should be beautiful and brightly lit, not lit by these ugly fluorescent tubes. But anyways, that's just me. Want to rip that out, install some can lights, drop in some designer fixtures. Interested in any advice that you can have, types of can fixtures, dimming mechanisms. Bright meal preparation is important, going to a romantic setting. So try to make this easy and but it's not easy. Let's just say kitchens are hard, okay? And actually I responded back and asked him for a couple pictures, and it didn't go anywhere. But I'll respond for him and I'll respond for you. This is another way that I can help you guys through the real-time consulting, because it's hard without pictures and without knowing what your situation is. It's hard for me to talk about it, but I can show you some of what I've done. We're gonna have a full kitchen lighting series coming up, along with a kind of part of our project series, which is also going to go into some of how I've remodeled this place, which is a very small place, and I only have a kitchenette here. But I've had kitchens in the past. I've had rentals. I've owned homes. I've made adjustments here and there. Never had the ability to just kind of gut something and start over, like he's talking about. But I have had the ability to make some adjustments. And the main thing about kitchens, we all know that everyone goes there, no matter if you're having a party and you expected everyone to go to the backyard or to your great room, they're going to wind up in the kitchen. But for preparation, for having a brightly lit kitchen, rule number 1, and I can show you this on these images where I didn't have enough light in the current kitchen. You can see this on the right side. And then ultimately I added more light so that, yes, I got more light and the appropriate amount of light onto my preparation surfaces. I had added kind of like a little IKEA kitchen island, little movable island thing to extend my counter space, but it still wasn't lit properly because the place I moved into had a couple can lights, but they just weren't quite as many that they needed to be, because people who remodel places don't always know how they're going to be used if they're remodeling it and then flipping it. And that was my situation here. So I added some light. We'll pan up, and I added some light via track lighting. So if you're doing a kind of a gut and a rebuild, then you can redo everything to your heart's content. Don't overdo it. Chris, who we actually met up with for the Smart Things episode last year at his place, he moved into a place that the previous owner literally had bought like a value pack of can lights and just installed them everywhere, and it was too much. I guess you can actually have too much lighting, but if I have too much lighting, I like to actually control it in all little separate groups. But for the kitchen, you want to make sure your prep surfaces where you're making food is brightly lit, because how things look is almost as important as how they smell, how they taste. It's all in our perceptions. We see that in restaurant menus and Instagram posts, food porn, quote unquote. So you want to make sure things are brightly lit, and you want to try to eliminate shadows where possible. If you can't eliminate shadows, It's okay. Just make sure all of your surfaces or all of your prep surfaces are lit. Now, I also like to make sure that my sink is always lit up nicely, so I'm not doing dishes in the dark. I think cooktops are important to brightly light as well. It used to not be really a thing. You'd have the little light kind of that would sit either under your integrated microwave or over underneath the hood, and usually they were dim and they didn't work very well. A lot of the newer ones have kind of halogen, or they've got now LEDs, and they're lighting things up, because again, you want to have light where you're cooking. And even if you're at the stove and you're boiling things, or you're creating some wonderful sauce for a dish, you just have to have things brightly lit. And you can, and we'll go into this in the kitchen series, you can also have light coming from multiple directions, whether that's whether that's flood or spotlights coming from track fixtures down, cans coming straight down, light that's being washed down from under cabinet lighting. There's multiple ways, and of course natural light is wonderful, but don't forget that at night you have the challenge of lighting things up. I see kitchens sometimes in friends' homes, and I see them in the day, and then I see them at night, and I'm like, did someone forget how to light this place up at night? Because it's dark. Not completely dark, but it's dark enough to where it just doesn't feel inviting. And I wouldn't want to cook in that kitchen or be in that kitchen. So that's the short answer. It's tough to email back and forth and try to advise on kitchens, especially without images. So that's the short answer. Light up your surfaces first. Make sure they're brightly lit. Don't skimp on lighting in the kitchen. You can always dim it down. I'm using TCP PAR 30 75 watt equivalent warm white lamps. They dim beautifully. They put out a gorgeous amount of light, focused light, in big pools of light onto my surfaces. And you'll see more of that in future episodes. But TCP is great for these focused PAR bulbs, and I don't have one in my hand, but I'm sure we can put up an image of one. So anyways, that's the short answer on kitchen lighting. We'll have more in future episodes. And if you're watching this, just remember your name, Steve. If you're watching this and you do want to get some more interaction, then please email me offline, and we'll go from there. Remember that you can email, of course, questions at lightinganswers.tv and get my attention, and I'll email you back usually right away. And if the question is something that pertains, I think, to the decent size of our audience, then we'll put it on one of these shows. I pick up almost everything in terms of comments, questions sent via email. Even if somehow you manage to message me through YouTube's messaging system, I get them all. Occasionally there may be days where I don't get back to you right away. It takes a couple days to kind of keep up with everything and life, so just be aware of that. And so let's see, questions at lightinganswers.tv. That's the email. Don't forget, this isn't really email, or this is not really lighting related, but it could be, I guess. We are running our Thing Charger giveaway from now until the end of the day or night. 12 a.m. Pacific, 12:01 a.m. Pacific on the 13th of April. Thing Charger is awesome, and it basically makes it so you cannot hide your outlets, dock something right down onto it, whether it's USB or Lightning or whatever, and it's an awesome device. So please enter that. There's a video link, I'm sure, and you can see that giveaway form on our website as well. So lots of things going on. The 2-year anniversary is coming up on April 13th, live broadcast at 10 a.m. Pacific. So, I can't say anything else, I think, for this episode, and I think we've answered the questions, hopefully. So, I am Jody Kancik for Lighting Answers. Thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, thanks for doing all of the stuff that you do for us here on the channel, and we'll see you next time on one of these Q&A episodes, or somewhere else, right here on Lighting Answers. See you then.